We were doing the Buffalo Bills today, and this was an interesting one because they went back-to-back in rounds 1 and rounds 2 with defensive ends, big defensive ends. How did you feel about their draft overall, Tony?
And in rounds 3 and 5, they went back-to-back with offensive linemen, offensive tackles. Yep. You know, I mean, they had a needed edge rusher. They hopefully have answered that needed edge rusher. I think Gregory Rousseau, I had him more as a second-round pick. I mean, the Bills drafted with the 30th selection. It basically is an early second-round choice. With Rousseau, he's a wild card. I mean, he played wonderfully in 2019, looked absolutely dominant, but it was the only season he really did it on the college level. Decided to opt out in 2020, had an okay pro day. In fact, he took a backseat to Jaelan Phillips, who worked out lights out, or tested, I should say, lights out. So you don't know what you get with Jaelan Phillips. I'm sure the Bills think that they can get him to where he was in 2019 and build upon that. If they do, I mean, they hit a home run. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I think they got a steal in round 2 with 𝗙𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗧, who's one of my favorite defensive ends. He's a complete defensive end. He's a guy who can rush the passer. He can stop the run. He occupies the gaps. He can even drop off the line of scrimmage in plain space. He was someone who, if he entered the 2019 draft, I think he would have been a top 45 pick. For whatever reason, the fact that there were so many offensive linemen, so many receivers, you know, he got pushed into the late part of round 2. I thought that they may have reached a little bit with Rousseau with that first selection, but I think they got an absolute steal with 𝗙𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗧 in round 2. Ditto with Spencer Brown in the 3rd round. I mean, Spencer Brown was getting some top 45 chatter as we move closer to the draft. He's a big college left tackle from Northern Iowa who projects to the right side, or he played some left tackle at Northern Iowa. He also played some right tackle, so I stand corrected on that statement. He's a guy who's incredibly athletic, was up and down at the Senior Bowl, had flashes, but there were also times when people were running over him, just hadn't played football all season because Northern Iowa decided to postpone their season or delay the start of their season to the spring. He's got great upside. I think the 3rd round is a great position for him. I think he's a guy that doesn't have to play as a rookie, but you can develop him behind Darrell Williams, and he will eventually take over that right tackle spot for the Bills. They took Tommy Doyle. I should have mentioned the offensive tackle.
Oh, yeah. My bad.
Another big athletic guy, a developmental guy, someone who I had graded as a late round pick. Coming into the season, he was listed as a potential top 60 choice by scouts. I never thought he was that type of player, but he, like Spencer Brown, is a good developmental prospect. Then they took Marquez Stevenson, who, again, I thought it was another good value pick by the Bills. A guy who could have snuck into the late part of round 3, could have snuck into the early part of day 3, goes in round 6. You know, he timed, I believe, in the high 4.4s during his pro day, but he plays a lot faster. He's a guy you can line up in the slot. He's a terrific vertical receiver. He'll also help out as a return specialist. I think you're looking at a real good number 4, potentially even number 3 receiver that you're going to use in the slot or on the outside.
Yeah, and then, Paris Ford kind of got all the buzz surrounding those Pittsburgh safeties to start the 2020 season, but Damar Hamlin ended up and proving that he was the better of the two.
Yeah, and Paris Ford had just a disastrous pro day, which is why he fell out of the draft. But, Hamlin is a guy who is a terrific football player. He's instinctive. He's a playmaker. He plays disciplined football. He's always making positive plays on the ball, whether in coverage or against the run. The problem is he just doesn't have great play speed. I know he ran the low 4.5s during his pro day, but he doesn't play that speed. But the fact is this, you're going to plug him in as your 4th safety, maybe even your 3rd safety, because more and more teams like lining up with 3 safeties, and I absolutely believe Hamlin can do that. He's been a real good football player. I think it's an excellent addition and a guy who I would expect to make the active roster come September.
Yeah, and Wisconsin picked the next pick. They have Isaiah Loudermilk. This one is Rashad Wildgoose. They got some crazy names in Wisconsin. What did you think about the player?
I would not have drafted him. I thought he was more a free agent, but he showed flashes last year. He had a solid pro day. He's got some upside. If you're looking for potential dime back, I'm sure he fits into that slot. I would have. I thought the 6th round was a little bit too early for him, but it is the 6th round, and as we talked about in the lead up to the draft, as I mentioned with Trey Wingo a couple of times, you were going to see situations in the later rounds where guys were going to be overdrafted, free agents who were selected in the draft, because of the fact that boards were running thin and there just weren't a lot of guys in this year's draft because of so many seniors going back. I think Wildgoose kind of kind of affirms that belief.
Yeah, and then they went with, again, on the offensive line, they went with offensive guard Jack Anderson from Texas Tech.
This is a terrific pick. I mean, 7th round pick, a guy who can play center, a guy who can play guard, someone you don't need to play right away. You're really looking for your 7th round prospects to play right away. He's going to be a very inexpensive backup for the next couple of years. And then as Jon Feliciano starts to age or Mitch Morse comes to the end of his contract, I think he can slide in. I thought Anderson would have been taken 2 rounds, if not 3 rounds earlier than he was. I thought this was a tremendous selection by the Bills.
And then the UDFAs, which one of them really speak to you from the Bills?
Well, there's 2 of them. Quentin Morris, the tight end from Bowling Green, who I think will compete for a roster spot. You know, at times, Quentin Morris looked like a legitimate number 2 NFL type receiver at Bowling Green. Then he went to the Senior Bowl and he couldn't catch anything. I mean, he dropped more passes than he caught. He looked absolutely awful. Then he had a great pro day. So, you know, Quentin Morris, who was lowly rated by scouts coming into the season, I think has an opportunity to make the roster. I also say keep an eye on Mccloud, the big corner from Notre Dame, who they signed as an undrafted free agent. Guy better facing the action, guy who I think could also move inside to safety. But he's got solid ball skills, struggles making plays with his back to the ball. So it's going to be a situation where you're going to play him in zone or backed off the line of scrimmage.
You know, I hope that Bills Mafia is happy with this because we definitely want to stay on their good side. Tony, thank you once again for coming by.